Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll tell you about one young punk who was busted for dealing potato chips. We'll also be talking about a jail to close for Christmas in Scotland, the Downsizer Dispatch, the First Amendment in schools, and a whole lot more, all coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. It is episode 138, and as always, it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, Nick, we have a full story to get to. We are going to start off over in the UK, in Liverpool to be exact, talking about a young boy who was caught on campus dealing a prohibited substance. Yes,
a young Liverpudlian. That's what you call people from Liverpool.
A Liverpudlian. Joel Bradley, who is a 12-year-old boy, was caught dealing a prohibited substance, and that prohibited substance was potato chips. Yes, ever since the school banned the sugary snacks and soda and potato chips, there's a black market has actually sprung up, a real black market, and this young boy was making about $30 a day dealing out potato chips. And so he was suspended. He's going to be suspended for a few days here for dealing these potato chips. But apparently it's not just him. There was a ring of about 7 other juveniles who have been caught up in this as well, who have been trying to make a few bucks off of what the administration here did, which was banning these substances from school. Now, what I find so interesting about this is we've called this all the time. We say whatever substance you ban, be it drugs or alcohol or potato chips, there will be a black market because there's still a demand, and it will spring up, and then other people can make money off it. Now, we've said this over and over again. We don't get a lot of ways to point this out.
It's not too often you see somebody dealing something as benign as potato chips, although I guess that these school administrators are arguing that potato chips are not a very benign substance. But I think
they've gone healthy. They've gone with the healthy snacks, got rid of the soda machines.
Yeah, they've gone overboard, I think.
Well,
when you start busting kids for having a potato chip dealing ring, which is what we're talking about here. It's not just that they take the vending machines out of the schools, it's that they're actually busting kids for selling potato chips, just like if you had kids on the school ground trying to sell, say, cigarettes or drugs. Now, granted, they might crack down a little bit harder if you were selling marijuana or cigarettes on the playground, but I don't know how much harder, especially with young kids. If there was a young child selling cigarettes on school grounds, I don't know that they get more than a few days suspension either. So apparently, at least in the UK, that's the society that people are living in, where young children enter the black market by dealing potato chips. And I would even make the claim that you're creating a gateway effect.
Oh, I think you definitely are, because these kids are making a lot of money.
Products and make a good return.
A good amount of money. I mean, when you're making $30 a day, and this is what he claims is profit, selling illegal potato chips, imagine what might be out there for substances that you can jack up thousands of percents instead of just a couple hundred, probably.
One day it's potato chips, the next day you're dealing crack. Now, that might be overstating it a little bit, but I don't know by how much, because the underlying economic principle is still there. And it's the same underlying psychology is still there. People's demand for these substances, whether they're potato chips or alcohol or crack cocaine, that demand does not go away. People still desire fatty foods and mind-altering substances, whether or not they're legal. And if you make that substance illegal, it doesn't cause people to stop supplying it or stop consuming it. It simply causes prices to go up because it's riskier and more difficult to supply whatever substance it might be, whether it's potato chips or cocaine, and people take a greater risk in doing that.
Yeah, and they'll continue to do so too. I mean, as kids get suspended now, there were previously what the headmaster over there, I guess their version of a principal, was saying that he knew of about 7 kids who regularly sold these snacks illegally, or I guess against the rules, because this isn't the law. This is just the rules in a school. He knows about 6 or 7 of them who are regular dealers, is what he calls them. It's funny. Great gateway right here. But maybe some of them are going to be scared off now that they're getting suspended, so maybe the price can go up even a little bit more. The more illegal or the more prohibited something gets, the greater incentive there is for certain individuals are willing to take risks to jump into that market. because there's going to be less supply, less suppliers here if some of them are scared, and so he'll be able to maybe make $45 or $50 or $60 a day selling illegal crisps.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, from an ethical standpoint, from a moral standpoint, it doesn't really make a difference whether the substance is prohibited or not. If it's okay to sell whiskey when it's legal, then from a moral standpoint, it's still okay to sell it when it's illegal. Just because something is illegal doesn't magically make it wrong. It's just a lot riskier. The same moral standing. It's just that you might go to jail. Now, you're probably not going to go to jail yet for selling unhealthy food, but it doesn't mean that people are going to stop or somehow decide that they don't want potato chips anymore. And it doesn't matter whether you bust a potato chip dealer or a drug dealer. I mean, I was just watching the story coming out of here in New Hampshire a couple of days ago on the news, and it was coming out of Portsmouth. There had been a big drug bust, and they had busted a lot of drug dealers who were selling drugs to supposedly to high schoolers. And from the pictures, I would bet that about half the people they busted were actually in high school themselves. They didn't really report on that fact. But the fact of the matter is, it's not going to stop the drug trade in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, or anywhere else. When you take a drug dealer off the streets, even if you take 20 drug dealers off the streets and take out an entire...
You took every single one that's currently dealing drugs. Every one of them, more people would step in to fill the void. Yeah, people would come in
from a different area, and you never get everyone anyway.
But even if you could, it wouldn't even
if you
work.
take a whole drug supplying network off the streets, and there's nobody to supply drugs to a neighborhood for 20 minutes, 6 hours. Within a day or two, there's going to be other people supplying drugs to that area. They might charge a little bit more, but the underlying fact is people are still going to be demanding illicit drugs, and they're still going to be obtaining them. Maybe at a slightly higher cost, but what benefit is that? That just means that people who either just want drugs or who have an addiction to some kind of substance are going to be more strapped for cash. And then I think you have a higher likelihood of crime rates increasing.
Right, and as you stated, Nick, it's wherever there's a demand and there's a black market. So it doesn't need to be drugs even. This article points out perfectly that if you're prohibiting potato chips, there will be a black market for potato chips. You're prohibiting drugs, black market for drugs. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. If there's a demand and it's prohibited, there will be a black market for it. All right, moving right along, Nick, we've got to come back over to the United States and talk about a subject that we've touched on quite a few times, more or less because there's currently a bill in Congress to make cyberbullying punishable by a 2-year jail sentence. But beyond that, there's some new news that's coming out of this with a Supreme Court ruling.
Well, it's a U.S. District Court ruling, and this is a big issue because essentially what they're doing here is there's an attempt to criminalize mean-spirited speech online, even though it's perfectly legal to walk up to somebody's face and call them all kinds of names. Now, there are certainly some limits that exist. If you lie about somebody and it's damaging to them, they can sue you for damages. They can sue you for libel. And if you directly, credibly threaten somebody with physical harm, if you're holding a machete and you say, I'm going to hack you with this machete, in most jurisdictions, that's a crime. That's criminal threatening. So there are already some limits. You can't tell somebody you're going to kill them and actually seem like you mean it. And you can't say untruths about people that are harmful to them, or they might sue you. But this just deals with hurtful things that are said about people. And this one case that is a test case here going to the U.S. District Court is an 8th grader at Beverly Hills Middle School. Now, what she had done was she had posted a mean YouTube video about another girl, which called her names such as a spoiled brat and the slut. So they said mean things about this girl in this YouTube video, but they weren't in school when they recorded it. It was posted online on their own time outside of school. And the school actually ended up suspending the girl who posted the video. And this has been happening a lot lately because there was that one case out of Missouri where a young girl actually killed herself after people made mean comments about her online. But last month, a U.S. district judge in LA sided with the student, saying the school went too far. Amid rising concerns over cyberbullying and even calls for criminalization, some courts, parents, and free speech advocates are pushing back. And I am thankful that they are. Students, they say, have a First Amendment right to be nasty in cyberspace. And in the judge's opinion, Judge Stephen Wilson wrote, it was a 60-page opinion, so this is a very small excerpt, to allow the school to cast this wide a net and suspend a student simply because another student takes offense to their speech without any evidence that such speech caused a substantial disruption to the school's activities runs afoul of the law. And as it should. You do have a right to be nasty to somebody. It's not just religious or political points that are protected by the First Amendment. If you don't like somebody, you have a right to say so. Now, maybe you're being mean if you say it to their face or you say it in an imprudent way, but you have a right to be mean and nasty. And free speech advocate Eugene Volokh weighs in here in the article saying, people don't appreciate how much the First Amendment protects not only political and ideological speech, but also personal nastiness and chatter. If all cruel teasing led to suicide, the human race would be extinct. And I think it's very important to remember that.
Yes, people are mean to each other. I'm not saying that it's right, it's mean, you're a nasty person. That's not nice. But the fact of the matter, right now there's a bill in Congress to say 2 years in jail for this. And right now we're just talking about whether suspensions are legal, and I guess this is just going to be covering in the district. I know that similar case has been filed for the Supreme Court, but they're yet to rule on it. So this is in a certain district.
I don't have too much faith in the courts at this point. I've seen a lot of rulings, especially Kelo versus New London, which dealt with property rights. There have been a lot of rulings that have come out of the Supreme Court.
Just to catch people up real quick, what that says is the government can take land from a private individual and give it to another private individual to make money off.
Well,
yeah, essentially that's what it boils down to.
If they can argue any kind of a public good. It used to be taking
and that's tax revenue is a public good.
Yeah, right. So basically they have carte blanche to steal from you and redistribute your wealth to other private people.
If someone else could make more money off it.
Right, as opposed to simply taking your house to build a road. If that wasn't bad enough, now they can take your business, give it to somebody else, if they think that somebody else will do something that creates a higher, better tax use for it. So, so there have been rulings like that, and I don't have a lot of faith in the higher courts to really uphold the Constitution. That being said, I am hopeful that in this case, this is such a blatant attack on the First Amendment, especially when you're dealing with people who aren't in the school system. I mean, the case law is there, unfortunately. I'm not saying I agree with it. But the courts have consistently ruled that schools, well, they can pretty much violate students' rights if they can come up with a reasonable sounding explanation for it. But when you're talking about criminalizing cyberbullying, you're not just talking about 15-year-olds in school. In many cases, you're talking about people pushing to make nasty speech illegal online. And while there is certainly a lot of nasty speech online, and in many cases it's uncalled for, it's impolite, I don't like it, I think we are far better off as a society when we're free enough to say nasty, mean things about each other and not have to worry about being thrown into jail, as opposed to the alternative, which is essentially a police state.
Right. I think this is a parental issue. Parents should be speaking with their children.
It definitely is.
Don't be a jerk.
Yeah, if your kid is posting a teasing YouTube
parents
video,
should take away their internet privileges, take away their computer. Anyways, if you have a different opinion, we'd love to hear it. fmtv@freemindsmedia.org is the email address. Agree, disagree, either way, we'd love to hear it. All right, real quick, Nick, we've got a brief Downsizer Dispatch. I guess it's not a regular one, but just directing people. We try to let them know how they can contact their congressmen in Washington, as well as their senators on a weekly basis with the Downsizer Dispatch. What do you got on tap this week?
Well, this week is sort of just a general appeal that I know it's a slow time of the year. A lot of people, understandably, don't have their mind on political affairs. You might be somebody who is concerned that government in Washington is too big, but you're busy buying presents for kids, thinking about how you're going to meet your in-laws soon. There's a lot of things that are on people's mind, but it's still important to let your elected officials in Washington know how you feel about the issues. So if you haven't done it yet, please go over to downsizedc.org and contact them on one of the campaigns over there. And if you have been over to downsizedc.org, you have, say, contacted your representatives on the Read the Bills Act or the Write the Laws Act, take a look at some of the other campaigns up there. There's a couple of big flagship campaigns for Downsize DC, but I think there's a lot of smaller campaigns that only have a couple thousand people signed on who've sent messages to the representative. Those smaller campaigns, a lot of them, I think are worthwhile, and they're just as important as the all-encompassing sweeping reforms like read the bills and write the laws. So go to downsizedc.org and check it out sometime. If you got time off of work, time off of school, nothing else to do, go over there and check it out.
Might as well. All right, Nick, when we come back, we are going to be talking about traffic court, one place in Indiana threatening motorists who challenged their tickets with huge fines, as well as one jail that is scheduled to shut down for Christmas. All that and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
Hi, I'm Ian Freeman from Free Talk Live and FreeKeen.com, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
I'd like to invite the viewers to log on to our website. freemindsmedia.org is the address. While it is still under construction, there was some issues with it over the past month. It's going back up and piecing itself back together, and there's a lot of it. By the time you're watching it, hopefully it'll all be functional, but for a great...
There's some functionality
There's
right
a lot
now,
of functionality right now, actually. So check it out, freemindsmedia.org. All right, jumping right into the stories, Nick. I know we are going to be getting into this jail that's closing down for Christmas. Not in the United States. We're going to be traveling around to other parts of the world. But first, I wanted to stop over in Indiana and talk about one court system in Indianapolis, Indiana, that is going to be threatening motorists with fines of up to $2,500 if they decide they want to challenge any kind of a traffic ticket or parking ticket in court. Motorists who receive minor parking tickets or traffic tickets in Indianapolis, Indiana are being threatened with fines of up to $2,500 if they attempt to take the ticket to court. In traffic court, Judge William Young has been making good on the threats by routinely siding with police officers in disputes and imposing fines of up to $500 if anyone contests the tickets. Motorists.
So this is an additional fine simply for entering a plea of not guilty and contesting the ticket?
Yep, and if you're
It's not a claim that it's a
guilty,
fee that it costs the taxpayers this much?
Nope, it's an additional fine if you are found guilty. If you're found not guilty, well, great. But they're saying the records are showing that the traffic courts are routinely just siding with police officers over and over and over again.
Oh yeah,
an unfair amount. I mean, the deck is already stacked against you. But the allegation here is that this one judge, at least Judge William Young, one of the many traffic judges, district judges, is routinely, even more than normal, siding with the police in cases and just blanket fines of $500, regardless of it was a $15 parking ticket or a $70 moving violation, whatever it is, just blanket fines of $500. And they're saying that they could go up to $2,500.
That's essentially the criminal justice system we have at this point. And it's not just this traffic court where it's a blatant fine if you decide to fight the ticket and you lose. To a large extent, if you look at the way sentences are structured here in the U.S., in many places, and it varies from state to state, but the courts rely heavily on plea deals. They simply don't have the time to prosecute everybody they want to prosecute and actually go to a full jury trial. So what they do is they take a sentence and threaten you with a sentence that, in my opinion, in many cases, is too harsh. Let's say you commit armed robbery. Well, they'll threaten you with 20 years in prison if you plead not guilty and fight it and lose. Then they'll offer you, say, 3 years, maybe out in 2, with good behavior, if you just enter a plea of guilty. And it's not always that dramatic, but generally that's the case.
Well, that's kind of putting you between a rock and a hard spot, because let's say you are innocent, 100% innocent, but you're given the case of either going before a jury and facing 20 years in prison or just biting the bullet and serving 2 to 3 to 4 years maybe. That's quite a difference. I mean, that's a tough decision for anyone to make.
Yeah. And it's the fact of the matter is, as much as people might not want to believe it, there are lots of innocent people who will take a plea deal.
I might in that case. Yeah, and that's a tough decision for anyone to make.
They'll enter a plea of guilty because they know they've been offered a deal where they only serve a couple of years. And in many cases, they'll significantly reduce the sentence because not every prosecutor, but many prosecutors care about getting a lot of convictions. It looks good for them. So if they can get people to enter guilty pleas, even if those people don't end up serving a lot of time, they can at least say, I convicted this many people for burglary. I convicted this many people for distributing narcotics.
It doesn't matter if they're
if they
guilty or
serve a
innocent.
day or a decade
Yeah.
to them, really.
Or guilty or innocent, plea bargain. I mean, what is it, 90%, 90-something% of cases are plea bargained out. So, I mean, not a whole lot going to jury trials. What's facing in on more minor infractions, such as a parking ticket or a speeding ticket, in this case, there might be something else behind it, such as maybe revenue. In this one case, in Indianapolis, Indiana, they're looking at, a press release was released on this. They say that they could be making $352,000 to $520,000 in additional revenue from parking citations over the next 12 months from people who are fighting this and imposing these larger fines on people. Which I do want to also point out that nowhere in this do they say if the plaintiff wins, do they receive an additional $2,500. If the police officer is wrong, if he gets ruled against, maybe it should come out of his pocket.
It's because it's about revenue.
But it doesn't work both ways. I mean, they're saying you're found guilty, you're going to owe an additional $2,500.
Yeah.
You're found innocent, well, you just lost a day at work, you had all this stress you went through, there's no penalization on the police officer's part for wrongly taking you to court.
Right, and this is where I have a big problem, and it seems like a perversion of the criminal justice system to me when they turn the courts into a tool for revenue generation. And if you walk into just about any district court in the United States, yeah, there are some people there who did cause disturbances to the peace. They did assault somebody, or do whatever. They stole a car. They're there for an arraignment on an actual serious offense. But you'll see a lot of people going there to contest a traffic ticket. They're pleading out to, say, possession of marijuana, things that are really just revenue-generating tools for the government. The government knows taxes aren't popular, so they'll just, they'll accuse people of committing crimes. The acts may really be criminal, but in many cases, people didn't actually do anything wrong. They've just criminalized something so that they can get fines out of people for it.
Essentially.
Right. And what this leads to is a situation where the criminal justice system, if they do want to prosecute people for murder and rape and assault and armed robbery, they have to rely on the tool of the plea bargain. So you have a system where you're going after so many people because of overcriminalization. You're going after so many people for, say, nonviolent drug offenses and speeding tickets that you don't have the resources to actually prosecute everybody who's committed a serious offense against people or property. You don't have the resources to prosecute it through an actual full jury trial. And that's the country we live in. And I think that's part of why our criminal justice system is so screwed up, because they use it as a revenue generation tool on minor offenses that should not be crimes in the first place. And this creates such a backlog that it's impossible to process those cases as well as the serious criminal cases that really should be prosecuted. So people who are in some cases very guilty and have committed crimes like rape or murder get off with a relatively light sentence.
Well, that actually segues perfectly into the next article that you have, Nick, which is talking about a Christmas that is closing down. A jail that is closing down for Christmas. Now, this isn't happening here in the United States, but in some cases, they may be letting out some very bad people who shouldn't be let out, maybe because they're in similar situation as us here in the United States. Possibly. Speculating here, but...
to some extent, this might be because of revenue issues, but to be honest, I believe it's because the English, or the British, have their own problem with their criminal justice system. Let's get into it here. An open jail is to close over Christmas while prisoners return home on leave. Northside Prison near Forfar, which currently has about 100 prisoners, will be mothballed for a week. Any inmates not eligible for release will be moved to nearby Castle Huntly. So this is coming from Scotland, and a Scottish prison service spokesman said today, that's the plan at the moment. We did that last year. The numbers in the open estate are quite low, and I'm assuming this is some kind of minimum security prison where there might not actually be locked doors or anything like that. But if you have prisoners in the open estate and they've been risk assessed, it makes sense that this gets tested. So I guess he's saying it makes sense that we deem these people are relatively low risk, so we're going to let them out. Which, Toby, you raised a pretty good point when we were discussing this article, is that if these people are in fact a low enough risk to be let out for a week for Christmas, why are they behind bars in the first place?
Yeah, if they've been rehabilitated, isn't it time to let them go and stop wasting the money on keeping them in a cage?
I mean, if they're not deemed to be unfit for society, if they're not deemed to be a danger to anybody else during Christmas time, shouldn't they not be a danger to anybody else the week before or the week after Christmas time? But it sounds like there are people here who arguably are risks to society being let out, and that's also a problem. Despite all of the police state measures we've seen in the UK, where they will prosecute you for crimes like essentially defending yourself, and they have millions upon millions of closed-circuit television cameras, when push comes to shove, they don't actually hold people accountable who commit real serious crimes. They're talking here about there are people who have been convicted of killing being released on this program, and people who have apparently committed sexual assaults.
Yeah,
and they're releasing these people into society because that's okay.
Well,
I mean, they have not actually served their sentence.
And you know what's funny? I was reading the article last year when they did this. At least one of the inmates did actually escape. They never reported back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that this comes from the same prison, but it does say sex offender Robert Foy absconded from Castle Huntley in 2007 after being let out to attend an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting.
Yeah, there was another one on there too. But the point
and
is,
raped a 16-year-old girl before being recaptured.
Yeah, wonderful. It looks like he was deemed fit. But that's the problem when you are over-criminalizing things, when you're criminalizing behavior that shouldn't be criminalized. And just like here in the United States, they have the same types of issues in Scotland and the UK and lots of parts of the Western world, actually greater parts of the world. But when you're over-criminalizing these things, you don't have room or the funding to lock up and keep locked up the real dangerous people, the ones who will rape and murder and hurt other people. When you've over-criminalized normal behavior and you've clogged up the system and you used up the resources trying to prosecute and cage innocent people, well, then innocent people get hurt because you've wasted the funding, you've wasted the resources, and you can't keep society safe from the dangerous ones.
Basically, that's the problem we have here in the U.S. and in other countries, apparently.
Yeah, it goes on all over the world. I mean, it's not only here in the United States that they really need to rethink the justice system.
Well, we've got a better one than many countries. At least you still get a jury trial here in the United States.
In
if
some
you press
cases.
for it, and
in
you
some
take
cases.
the risk of getting a significantly increased sentence.
And of course, that jury's packed with a bunch of fools and morons that have been weeded out, and anyone with half a brain wouldn't stand for
I'm not saying
any
the
real
jury.
kind of a jury trial.
I'm not saying the jury selection process is perfect either.
I'm sorry, Nick. It's the dumb of the
I
dumb.
think trial by jury is a great institution. It's better than the alternative.
Chances are, if you've served on a jury, you have the inability to think outside the box. Anyways, that'll do us for us. Mad at us? Think a different opinion? FMTV at freemindsmedia.org is the address. freemindsmedia.org is the website. And that'll do it for us. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode. Tune in to Free Minds Radio this Sunday and every Sunday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.